Okay, so AP, this is your primary lecture for Wednesday. It's all getting very confusing to me. You keep seeing me in the same outfit, so it gives you a pretty good idea that I keep just recording and recording and recording. So today we're going to talk about really all the important stuff for your essay. Between this video and a little supplemental video I will do about the Boston Massacre. This is almost everything you need for your essay, so you can just get it out of the way early here. So let's talk about the stamp tax uproar. And this is really going to start everything or unveil everything that there are issues with. So the French and Indian War, which the British call the 7 Years' War, which is confusing because it kind of goes on 9 years. It's just undeclared for 2 years. This war left the British as the undisputed champion of the New World. They, or at least North America, their empire, their colonies are secure. However, they amass a terrific debt in doing that. And so how this is essentially going to affect our relationship with the British. They do not expect us to pay off this debt. We are making too much money for them to ask us to pay off the debt. Which is what's crazy is the next thing I'll tell you is that we lost our minds because they asked us to pay 1/3 of the cost of maintaining an army here for our protection. Now, I'll definitely give you, and I'm no pro-British person, it's just sort of funny when you get down to it. These are the excuses we have. I really think it's because culturally we had grown separate. But we're mad because we're being asked to pay 1/3 of the cost of what it costs them to maintain their troops here. But again, we're really mad about some other things. So let's go over some things. So you have Prime Minister Grenville. And he realizes that nobody is following any of the British commands here in the colonies. And he says, all right, step one, we're going to enforce the navigation laws. Now, we really don't have a leg to stand on here, but we don't like it. Because we don't like that they're actually enforcing laws that have been on the books for like 150 years, we're going to freak out about all these other things. And the first one would be the Sugar Act. 1764, first law ever passed by the body parliament for raising taxes, raising revenue directly from the colonies. It basically puts a foreign tax, a tariff on sugar. That does not sit well with us. We complain about it so much, they repeal it. The Quartering Act of 1765, that the way that we will help defer the cost of the troops that are here to protect us is that we being the colonies must raise funds to house and feed troops. So that seems pretty reasonable, but that again doesn't go over very well. But the one that's really going to blow up is the stamp tax. Mandated the use of stamped paper or a fixing of stamps, certifying the payment on any bill of sale, a legal document, playing cards, pamphlets, newspapers, diplomas, bills of lading, which would be like inventory, and marriage licenses. So all of those things have to have this stamp. You have to pay for that stamp, and if it doesn't, it's illegal. That does not sit well with us at all. There's a lot of different reasons, and we're going to go through those, but really, you could apply half of these reasons to any of these laws, but this is the one that we're going to focus on the most. And so the first one is that if you break this law, you go to the admiralty courts instead of regular civilian courts. You go to a military court, and that's big. That's a big deal. That's a big problem. So sorry, I've been teaching like 4 days worth of days today, losing my voice. So in the admiralty courts, there's one major thing going on that's going to bother the colonists, and that is we are used to the notion of people being innocent until proven guilty. That is not the case in the admiralty courts. In the admiralty courts, you are guilty until proven innocent. Now, that just sounds like a little play on words. Think about it like this. Who would this be ridiculous for? Who do I pick on today? Today we'll pick on Sam. Sam, I accuse you of graffitiing my car, okay? I picked on Sam the other day because she appeared to be the only person in our whole class that hadn't been stuck. Really, we should be jealous of her in a wedding at least once. And so Sam's mad, and I accuse her of graffitiing my car. For her to be found guilty in our world, the real world today, she is going to be presumed innocent, and somebody would have to prove that she did it. I have some cameras around the house. Maybe the footage found her. I have witnesses, this, that, and the other thing. Maybe she left behind her license. That'd be pretty good proof that she did it. Okay, that sort of thing. But in an admiralty court, I've made the accusation, and now she is guilty until she proves herself innocent. Think about how crazy that is. Well, first off, at least at the time of this recording, Sam or no one else had done any damage to my property. So we know right now that Sam has not graffitied my car. And yet, I don't think you can prove that you didn't, even though we all know it didn't happen. Example, Sam, I accuse you of graffitiing my car last night at 3 a.m. And you would say, well, that's ridiculous. I was asleep. I'd say, well, I don't know what you're doing other than you graffitied my car. Prove you didn't do it. Again, let me note that Sam did not do it. I don't think anybody did it, I hope. But Sam can't prove she didn't do it because I doubt anybody will witness the fact that Sam was asleep at 3 a.m. They'll say, well, my parents or whatever, really? Were they watching you sleep? And if they do, I feel bad for you because that's kind of creepy, just staring at you while you sleep. It's hard to prove you didn't do something. It's much more reasonable in a court of law to make the prosecution prove you did it. So in admiralty court, once you're accused, it's kind of over. And so we have a major, major problem with that. The other major problem we have with that is, what do we even need a British Army for? They're going to send 10,000 troops over here to protect us against Native Americans and the French. Hey, I got news for you. We beat them, at least predominantly. Native Americans have been pushed. Any Pontiac's alliance fallen apart. We defeated them as well. They're not the threat that they used to be. The French, they're super not a threat. I mean, they've been wiped off the continent. They're like reduced to a small portion of the West Indies. So our big argument is, we got to pay 1/3 of the cost to maintain this army of 10,000 men. What do we need them for? We just won. We, the American colonists, in conjunction with the regular British Army, we won. We don't need these guys. We're wasting our money. But probably the biggest argument we had, and I'll give another one as well, it's a little confusing, but the biggest argument we had was, we are entitled to the laws of any English citizen. You go back to the original compacts, the Mayflower Compact, you go back to the charters with Jamestown. We were entitled to the rights of a British citizen. Even if we were never born in Great Britain, we're supposed to be British citizens. And every British citizen would have known at that time, but one of the most famous documents in world history, certainly in English history, this document that's so profound, you must say it in the right way, the Magna Carta, the Great Charter. The Magna Carta from 1215 said, we will never tax you without representation. You have to have representation to be taxed. And the American colonists go, we don't have representatives in Parliament, therefore you can't tax us. No taxation without representation. They didn't just pull this out of the air. They pulled this out of a legal precedent by that point that had been around for hundreds and hundreds of years that we were entitled to because we are allegedly English citizens. But they don't want to treat us like that. That's why men like George Washington don't get to be lieutenant colonel anymore. They have to be captain because we're starting to get the sense that we're sort of English citizens, but not really. The Magna Carta says essentially no taxation without representation. Now, I'm going to tell you the ugly truth of this. We don't want representation. We don't. The British, at that point, still outnumber us. And so we would just get outvoted all the time in Parliament anyway. We don't really want representation in Parliament. What we really want is to not pay any taxes. This is our excuse. This is what we're going to hang our hat on. Now, there's a legal definition that some of the lawyers in particular, many of which went on to help write the Declaration and the Constitution, that'll hang their hat on. And they'll say, technically, and if this confuses you, it's okay. You can skip this part. We don't quibble with the idea that you can have an external tax on us, meaning a tax to run your empire that happens to affect us. What we don't want is you giving us an internal tax without us having representation. So in today's world, when I buy a Honda, I have to pay a higher price for that Honda because there's a tariff put on it because it was made in Japan. That's an external tax, okay? An internal tax is I go to the store and I buy a Yeti mug and they charge me 6.5% sales tax. That's an internal tax. They're raising it directly right in front of me. What the colonists are saying is you don't have the right to do this sales tax, this internal tax, like a Stamp Act. You only have the right to do external taxes because we need representation otherwise. And so the British have a very clever answer. The British say, but you are represented virtually. But what? They say, well, virtual representation. Every British representative represents the interest of all British citizens here and abroad. What a bunch of malarkey. If you think that's a really good system, if you believe that, then I would argue, then why do we even have representatives in Ohio? We don't need our 2 senators. We don't need our members of the House. We could just, I'm sure that the good people of Arizona will only be in the best interest of all Americans. In a larger sense, maybe, but what about anything specific to Ohio? What about us having a person that we can specifically call? I can look up who my congressperson is, and I can email them and I can call them, and they may not care, but I mean, at least I have somebody specific I can go to. And we can't. We can just call any, or well, we can write letters at that time to any of them because they all virtually represent us. Please. Nobody's buying that one. So opponents of this decide that they want a Stamp Act Congress, and they ask for volunteers to meet in New York. And 27 members from 9 colonies show up for the Stamp Act Congress. I find this number funny. It's still not 13, but it's 2 more. It's 2 more than showed up when the British asked us to meet to talk about how to defend ourselves in the French and Indian War. When it comes to defending ourselves, when ordered by the British, 7 show up. When it comes to complaining about taxes, 9 of us show up. That's interesting. And they make a few agreements. They make a few decisions. And they say, okay, here's how we're going to yield our power. We're going to do non-importation agreements. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a different name for a boycott. We are going to boycott British goods, which means almost everything. Boycotts are incredibly effective. We know about boycotts throughout history. Right off the top of your head, you're probably thinking of the Montgomery bus boycott. That stuff works. Montgomery bus boycott, not only legally, the courts ended up coming down on Dr. King's side, but I want you to know that the pressure on those businesses was tremendous because, I mean, let's just be grown-ups about this. I wish I could say that the people that ran the Montgomery bus line suddenly realized the error of their ways and that racism was wrong. But really what happened was they lost a lot of money and said, we better change our ways, probably because of that. And then the realizing hopefully eventually came, but probably later on. These boycotts can force action. And there's been a history in our country of boycotts from the beginning, all the way back to colonial times. But in more modern times, Procter & Gamble has been boycotted over animal testing, so much to the point where they lose money and they change some of their policies. There's been threatened boycotts over Pepsi because of some advertising. Remind me in the live session, I'll tell you that one, that's kind of a long story. The state of South Carolina has been boycotted twice in the last 10 years, once over flying a Confederate flag in their capital, and once over, I believe, transgender bathroom issues. And I believe in both cases, boycotting the state, you go, how do you boycott a state? Like the NBA didn't bring their all-star game there. Tourism, a lot of people who would have spent tourist money there didn't go there. And so that can cost, I believe in each of those cases, potentially hundreds of millions, in one case, billions of dollars. There's a long history of a company does something, or even a state in that case does something that offends a large group of people. And if you can get enough people to sort of vote with their money to say, well, I'm not going to buy this product then until you change your ways, you can have a tremendous impact. Now, the whole catch is, I'll say this carefully. It's not that it doesn't matter how noble your cause is, but sometimes good causes just don't get supported because they just don't catch on. If you can get a good chunk of the consumers on your side, it will be effective. And we got a lot of consumers on our side because a lot of Americans believe that these taxes were unfair. And then there was the help of the Sons and Daughters of Liberty. And these were groups of people that essentially enforced this through vigilante justice. I mean, they sometimes attacked people for purchasing British goods. Sometimes those attacks involved tarring and feathering. Tarring and feathering, I always thought when I was younger sounded rude, but almost funny in a way, like I wouldn't want it to happen to me, but wouldn't it be funny if it happened to somebody else? Tarring and feathering is no good, and I mean no good. People died from being tarred and feathered. You could be tarred and feathered a whole bunch of different ways. So it has varying degrees of physical pain, emotional too, but physical is the more primary concern in this case. If somebody tarred and feathered me wearing what I'm wearing, and they let me wear what I'm wearing, I'm not going to be as hurt as some other people because I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt. I'm wearing long pants today. And so a lot of my skin is not going to be exposed, especially if they don't pour it over my face. How hot it was when they poured it. Sometimes they poured it just hot enough to be viscous, to be liquidy. Sometimes it was like bubbling hot. And if it's bubbling hot, whether I'm wearing clothes or not, it's going to cause severe burns. Now, if they make the person strip down and then apply the tar, now we got a whole nother situation because it's going to adhere to the skin, and then they feather on top of that. And there are lots of stories that when they tried to remove that, it took a lot of the skin with them. And I don't understand the science quite behind this, but there's a point, your body actually, your skin needs to breathe. And if enough of your skin cannot breathe, you will die. It's why if somebody has burns covering X% of their body, 80% of their body, sometimes they don't survive. It's just too much damage to the skin. And so this was being done to people. And so even people who maybe didn't want to be a part of the non-importation agreements or these boycotts, they suddenly were a part of it because they didn't want to get tarred and feathered. And so now all of a sudden England is hit. They are getting crushed with these non-payment of taxes. They're going broke doing this. So they repeal the Stamp Act. It worked. The pressure worked. But then they passed the Declaratory Act, which to me is the funniest law the British have ever passed in their life. Because it basically says, we're going to repeal this, but we're declaring in the Declaratory Act that if we wanted to make you pay it, we could. Please, are you kidding me right now? Imagine this. Who will it be today? Lydia. Lydia, we meet live, okay? And Lydia says a bunch of cuss words at me. I'm sick of all your homework, bleep, 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 okay? To my knowledge, Lydia does not use such language, but it's a good example. And I go, you're removed. And Lydia goes, I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm not leaving. I go, no, you're removed, get out. She goes, yeah. Nope, I'm not leaving. And I go, I said get out, or I'll push the button. And you go, no, you won't. If I then go, well, okay, if I really wanted to throw you out, I declare I could, stop it. Stop it. I might as well just sit in Lydia's seat and let her take over the class, because at that point, she's in charge. Are you going to tell me that we're going to completely get out of paying this tax, and then they're going to declare we can make you pay it? Can you? Because you just didn't. You just gave up. Clearly, you can't. So they go back to the drawing board. And this new prime minister, Champagne Charlie Townsend, who they inexplicably then tell you, oh, by the way, he could give speeches completely drunk. Okay, good for him, I guess. He says, here's what we're going to do. You got this little thing about internal versus external taxes. We're going to put external taxes on things like glass, white lead, paper, paint, and tea. That'll make everybody feel better. It's an external tax. Now, tea, you have to understand, has a special place in America at that time. Well, it still does in British society. Tea was by far the most consumed product. It was what most people drank. Water wasn't always safe. I know. Tea is made of a lot of water, and I don't even like tea. But tea was it. It was the most popular drink. So this is far-reaching. A tax on tea might not affect half of our class. I don't know how many of you drink tea. A tax on tea then affects virtually everybody. And at this point, I don't know how else to word this. Now we just don't like taxes, and we have flexed our muscles. And so we don't care that now it's an external tax. Now we're like, no, that sounds sketchy. We're not doing that. Especially when they say that external tax is going to be used to pay governors. Because one of the few things we were able to do to yield control is to take the power of paying the governors and use it against it. Say, oh, you're going to do that. That sounds sketchy. We're withholding your pay. Now, if this, even if it is an external, if this tax on tea is going to be used to pay governors, we don't have any leverage over them. And so now you see the non-importation agreement start again. And I think Bailey says that the tar kettle start bubbling over again. And so, oh my gosh, now the British are really, really upset. Now we won't even pay an external tax. they've had it. And we're smuggling tea, and the whole time, even during the French and Indian War, we were doing some smuggling, and they're just like, man, you guys, it's like you don't care about Britain. Some don't. And so that's when they land 2 regiments of troops in Boston. And boy, any pretense that the troops were here to protect us from the French and Indians are out the door, because there's not a tremendous threat left, but whatever threat there is on the frontier. And let me tell you what's not the frontier: Boston. There's probably, if we're talking about the danger of being attacked by French or Native Americans, there's probably not a safer place in the New World than Boston, because it's Boston. It's established. It's well into the interior. There's a lot of land you got to go through before you cut through the frontier and get to cities and then get to Boston. So when you land troops in Boston, nobody's confused. Those troops are not there to protect us from the French and Indian threat. They're there to enforce law and order, and that does not sit well with us. And so this leads to if you're British, either what we call the Boston Incident, or if you're American, the Boston Massacre. I don't know if either is an appropriate name in reality, but I have a separate video for that because you have to be able to describe that. So I give you both accounts. I get firsthand account from both sides of that issue. But regardless, it happens, and it is a touchstone point. This 1770, this occurs, and now there is so much tension between the British and the colonists now. It'd been bubbling over during the French and Indian War, after the French and Indian War, and now it's really starting to step up. So that's when you start to see the colonies actually do a little bit more unification here, and they start these committees of correspondence, letter writing organizations to complain to each other and appraise each other's situations about what's going on. And all the colonies start to get these letter writing groups so that we can know what's going on everywhere. And we can compare notes and talk about what works and what doesn't. It's Twitter before Twitter. It's us communicating with all the other colonies about the stuff the British are doing. And now we're finding that something is finally actually unifying us. That's when a weird turn of events takes place. Something that shouldn't have anything to do with anything, but we're already mad. And it's our last topic for today. While all this is going on, this company called the British East India Company is just in bad shape through mismanagement. And they have 17 million pounds of unsold tea. And they're going to go broke. And the British do not want them to go broke. The British government do not want them to go broke for the same reason that during the COVID crisis, the United States gave money to airlines and cruise industry, because if big businesses like that do go under, then the government can't collect the taxes from those big businesses. So sometimes we will pay to bail out a business because in the long run, we hope to make more money in taxes. Well, this British East India Company is going to go under because they have all this tea that they've mismanaged and is not sold. So the British government says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a monopoly on the American tea market. Now, the British East India Company knows they're going to unload all this tea. Because they have a set market, they can actually lower the price. So in the British government mind, everybody wins. The British East India Company gets to unload their tea and save them from bankruptcy. The British government gets to win because the business, this huge company, doesn't go under and they'll collect the taxes from it. And the Americans should win because they have, the British East India Company has a monopoly. They'll lower the tax or the price of the tea to even before it was taxed. So even though there still is a tax on it, it's a lower price than before when there wasn't a tax on it. We're so sensitive by this time that we go, aha, you're trying to trick us. You're trying to trick us into paying this tax by making the product actually cheaper and easier for us to buy, just so we won't notice and suddenly accept the tax on tea. You didn't get us. We're not taking the bait for the cheap tea. And so we have a series of tea parties. Now, the most famous one, of course, is the Boston Tea Party. But there were other less dramatic tea parties that occurred overland, like wagons being set on fire and things like that. These tea parties occur, and the British go, okay, that's it. We're done. We're not playing anymore. It's time we teach these people some lessons. That's what we'll talk about on Wednesday. All right? Or Thursday. Is today Wednesday? I don't even know what day it is anymore because to me, it's the same day. I think it's Wednesday, and we'll find out more about that on Thursday. Everybody have a great day.